Before beginning today's lesson, it's important that you make sure that you've already completed the 30 Facts worksheet that's located at leibniz.org/makingart under the Critical Analysis Description webpage. Today's lesson is about describing an artwork and the importance of powerful observation. The goals for today are to define what it means to truly observe something, to explain the difference between looking at an artwork and simply seeing an artwork. There are also two fundamental kinds of observations that are quite different, and you should be able to explain the difference between these two types of observations by the end of the lesson today. Lastly, we need to be able to identify and then describe what you are looking at using proper vocabulary, using verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. Lastly, the end goal is for you to apply your observation skills to use your vocabulary and write an accurate and detailed description of an artwork. This is the work that we're going to be using for our lesson today. And with this lesson, I want you to imagine that we are creating an exhibition based on a visual theme. We want to have an exhibition that has a number of artworks that are visually consistent with this one by Van Gogh, created in 1888. So we need to look carefully, look at the details in order to figure out what other types of artworks need to go into this particular exhibition. The first thing that you need to do is to take that list of 30 facts and divide them up between the two types of observations. In this case, we are using two categories. We haven't labeled them yet, but in category A, I'm saying that there's a clock on the wall and that there's a pool table in the middle of the room. I'm going to flip back, right, and you can clearly see the clock in the top left and the pool table, which is in the dominant position in the center of the painting. Okay, so the second category of observations include the idea that there are people in the room that are depressed and that the man dressed in white is a pool shark. Okay, so looking at the image, you can see the man dressed in white sort of on the 1/3 line using the rule of thirds, clearly in a white suit. The depressed people sort of pushed off to the margins, off to the sides next to the very edge of the frame, sitting at the tables on both the left and the right. Okay? So these are our two sets of observations, category A, category B. We need to figure out what the difference is between these two sets of observations. Okay? So now it's your turn to help. So you have a list of 30 observations that you completed prior to watching this video. You're going to use those 30 observations. Okay? It doesn't matter how important or unimportant you think those details are. And you're going to identify which observations belong to category A, which observations you believe are more like the observations in category B. Spend some time, okay, and label them A or B on your worksheet. Okay. Remember, the reason that we're doing this is we want to make sure that the visual content of the artwork is uniform for our exhibition. Okay. So I'm going to switch to the next slide. It's going to be an image of the artwork, and take a minute to pause the work and organize whether it is your observations or category A or category B. Okay, so now that you've organized your own personal list, what we need to do then is think about what are the differences between column A and column B. What's the unifying idea that makes column A observations belong together? What are the qualities of observations in column B that make those observations belong together? What I'm going to suggest is that category A are factual observations. These are sort of undisputed. Everybody's going to recognize a clock. Everybody's going to recognize a pool table. We don't need to argue about what those things are. Whereas category B These are more interpretive. We're inferring what is happening. I don't know for sure that the man in the white suit is actually a pool shark, right? It's a guess based on personal experience, based on other observations from outside of the painting. Likewise, there's an alternative explanation as to why the people might have their head down on the table. Maybe they have passed out because they're drunk, not necessarily because they are depressed, right? With interpretive observations, we don't necessarily know for sure what is happening, but we have a good understanding that, it's fairly plausible. In order to make sure that your interpretive observations are relatively accurate and widely accepted, you need to make sure that you're backing them up, and you do that by using your factual observations. Okay, so the art of description. You need to make sure that it's based on factual looking. Looking is detailed, it is specific, it is concentrated. If you are merely seeing the artwork, all you're doing is you're glancing at it, you're taking in the whole thing. Right? You're not looking for the details. Secondly, any interpretive observations are backed up with appropriate factual observations. Remember, even if you're using interpretive observations, you're not interpreting the meaning of the artwork as the whole at this stage of the critical analysis process. Describing requires two phases. You need to identify what you see, a man in a white suit, and then describing. He has gray hair, he has a mustache, his hands, his thumbs are in the lip of the pockets of his pants. His arms are slightly bent. He's wearing a black tie. He's standing behind the pool table. Right? So identify and then describe. Also, think about visual dynamics. Follow the natural progression of where your eye moves through in order to record your observations. Lastly, you need to be able to write a descriptive paragraph. Right? In order to do this, you need details, you need accurate observations. Essentially what you're trying to do is paint a picture with words, and it needs to be so vivid that your reader can actually imagine what the artwork looks like without necessarily seeing the piece itself. And lastly, using the visual dynamics to help you organize your writing is a very simple thing to do in order to create a sense of flow. Right? The painter or the artist used visual dynamics to control your gaze. Use that same structure to organize your writing.